Thanks for joining us for this brief Rhetorica session at the desk with today's communication expert, Allan Chapple. Allan's a former journalist, one of Australia's foremost communication and presentation skills trainers and coaches, and we've had a lot of fun and productive time working together, not only around Australia, just about in every capital city, I think, Allan, we've worked together, as well as overseas. Allan, thanks for joining us today. I understand you've distilled all those years of experience and wisdom down to 7 deadly sins against communicating credibly.
Yes, Anthony, thanks very much for inviting me to speak to you today. Audiences from all over the world identify 7 deadly sins. Disgruntled, bored, disappointed audiences tell me repeatedly that there are 7 main faults that work against the credibility of public speakers. The first is that the words seem to be over-prepared or over-rehearsed.
Yeah.
In other words, there seem to be too many devices or too many tricks being employed in delivering the speech. The answer to that, quite simply, is every single device that you include, whether it's a pause, or whether it's raising your voice, or whether it's becoming more animated or slowing down, every single device should be justified, should be part of the message that you're delivering.
Do you think, Allan, that problem occurs partly because companies will script a 60-second message rather than allowing the person to use language that's their own? And if that's the case, what's your advice?
Well, this leads on to point number 2, which the sin number 2 was that the words don't seem to be their own, or don't, if you're the speaker, they don't seem to be your own. And I suggest to people that script writers notwithstanding, and if there are any listening to this, my apologies in advance, but a script writer's written your script, that's well and good. You need to look at the words he's prepared and make sure that they are words that you would use. And the way to find this out is to simply say them out loud and try them out for comfort.
And if they feel forced or aren't words that fit your vocabulary or your personality, find replacements.
Exactly. Put it in your own words. I've said repeatedly to very senior executives, you don't seem comfortable with these words, and they'll scratch their head and say, well, I thought I was, but they don't seem to be flowing out very well. And I'll say to them, okay, what would you say? Put it in your words.
Okay, so sin number 1 is being over-prepared. Number 2, not using your own words. What about number 3?
Yep. Number 3 is that the words might be foreign to your audience. In other words, you've heard the expressions bureaucratese or technocratese. Using technical expressions that are sometimes foreign to your audience can alienate them and will certainly start to chip away at your credibility. The answer to that, of course, is to research. Speak simply in the words that your audience would use in conversation with each other about important things, but words that they would use every day.
What about if you're talking to the in crowd? You're an engineer speaking at an engineers conference. A certain amount of jargon, if you like, is going to be acceptable. Is that right?
Of course, and that still makes sense with what I've just said. If you're using words that your audience would use, then the engineers would expect you to use words that they would use in everyday conversation as well. So it's knowing your audience and knowing what their words are.
Okay. Allan, what about number 4?
Number 4 is that the words seem to lack any personal turns of phrase or any personal connection with the speaker. Often we're overly concerned with being factual and covering off every single aspect of the subject we're covering. And it can seem to, once again, sound like it's not something that you really feel. So I invite people to occasionally put in a little bit of an example of the way they feel or a revealing of the way they feel about what they're saying. Occasionally saying, this really excites me, and then on to what you're going to say next.
Okay, so it's bringing a small personal element without over-indulging.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Not every second sentence, but occasionally, perhaps once in a paragraph. Or one paragraph you may not, but twice in the next paragraph, within reason.
What about number 5?
Number 5 is that you seem removed from your audience, that you seem to be talking at them rather than to them. Now, the answer to this, quite simply, is to look into the eyes of your audience, read the reaction there, and acknowledge, include, adapt what you're going to say next because of that reaction. As soon as your audience feel that you're talking to them, not at them, then they will believe you a lot more.
Allan, what about when you can't see the eyes of a large audience from the stage?
Sometimes parts of the audience, as they go back further from the actual stage, may be in darkness. Because the glare of the lights, it may be impossible to see their faces. What I suggest to people is the first 2 rows in front of you should be visible. So sell to that group of the audience, look into their eyes, and then you can look up and look into groups of a dozen or more in the rest of the auditorium and imagine a similar kind of, and acknowledge a similar kind of response. So the occasional nod that says to the audience, yes, you've got what I'm saying, and now I'll move on.
What about point number 6, Allan?
Point number 6 is that the words that you're saying seem to be irrelevant to the needs of your audience. In other words, they've come to hear about a particular couple of points, and you've touched on one of those, but now you've got off on a tangent about something else. The answer is quite obviously research your audience and make sure that you're going to cover all the points that they need to know about.
Allan, finally, what's the 7th deadly sin?
Number 7 can often be the most important, and it is that how you are saying the words, how you're putting across your message, ignores the needs or feelings of your audience. It's very, very important that you are expressive, that you are clear, but it's also very important that you take into account the needs, the emotional needs of your audience. It may be that they are already on board with the point that you're making, and if you are not in contact with them, if you're not relating to them, you're taking too much time over a particular point. It may be that they've raced ahead and you're still recovering old ground. On the other hand, it may be that they're confused or overly concerned about a particular point and you've glossed over it. So how you actually put across your message in terms of pace, pitch, using the pause, and the tone of voice that you use, and the rest of the self-expression should suit the needs of your audience. If you want to excite them, you need to be excited as well. If you want to console them, then you need to seem concerned about their worries and their issues.
Allan, if you could distill all of that wisdom into just 3 points, how would you advise us?
Very hard to distill it all, but if I had the luxury of only 3 points. Number 1, research and prepare your content and how you're actually going to present it, and most importantly, prepare mentally. Psych up if you feel it yourself. Number 2, embrace the pause. Don't be afraid to make your audience wait for the final words of the sentence. When you pause, you add impact to what you've just said, and you add expectation, anticipation to what is going to follow. And number 3, and perhaps most importantly, stay connected. Relate to your audience.
Terrific. Allan, on a final note, if anybody's wondering, well, is it a little bit euphemistic? Is it hyperbole to suggest that there are 7 deadly sins of communication? Are they really that serious? In other words,
you can watch an audience disconnect from you just committing one of these sins. If you look out into your audience, you'll see the body language that we were talking about before. You'll see the crossed arms. You'll see that there's a lapse of concentration. You'll see people starting to look at their notes or handouts that you've given them. Or even worse still, you'll see that they're starting to drop off to sleep or to find excuses to leave early. Yes, they are. They can be deadly to the credibility of any speech.
All right. Hey, thanks for your time today, Allan. I really appreciate you taking this time out of your busy schedule, and we'll talk again soon.
Pleasure.